Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Sort of left off in the middle of something. That's 153b. Talking about someone that's carrying his wallet and it becomes Shabbos. And he's out somewhere. He needs to get his wallet home. We're afraid that he's going to carry it on Shabbos. So if there's a non-Jew with him, he can give it to the non-Jew. So what about carrying it less than 4 cubits in a public area and then stopping and then starting? So you never really carry a full 4 cubits, 4 amas. So the sages said not to do that. And we said that that was a decree that was made in the attic of Chadanya ben Chizkiah, where Beis Shammai had a stronger opinion and a stronger vote, and that decree went through on that day. So Rabbi Lezer said that Baybayim Gidshasa, the decrees that they made, they used the heaping saw, like a large vessel. In other words, the decrees that they made were acceptable. They were all able to be contained. And the decree was that you give it to a guy to carry, and you don't carry it yourself. And Rabbi Yeshua says, Baybayim Machkus, so that the decrees that they made it was a small vessel, and the people couldn't keep them up. Yeah.
We're talking about a wallet, right?
Yeah.
So if it's on Shabbos, how can you touch a wallet either way?
I guess because you have it in your hand already. I guess that's the
then you would have to drop it. It's money. There's no carrying either way.
I'm not sure if a muktzah that you have in your hand, if you're allowed to continue holding until you find a place to put it. That we had something. I'm not sure if that applies to money. You know, it applies to certain muktzahs.
Yeah, weren't they saying that because of money is dato shaladam, he's going to be worried about it the whole time, but they're finding the various loopholes to.
Right, or that could be that they're being lenient here on the laws of muktzah because they're afraid that you're going to end up carrying it outright. So in other words, originally you could carry it less than 4 amas, but on that day they made a decree that you're supposed to give it to a non-Jew to carry. So the machlekes Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua, if this was, at least the way Rashi learns this, if this was an accepted decree, if this was appropriate. So Tanya, we started in a brisa, that's where we started. It's the last word on the line. The line starts Rabbi Yeshua, it's about in the middle of the page. Tanya Mashal de Rabbi Lezer l'mad avadayma. An example, a parable for Rabbi Lezer. What is this similar to? He said that the decrees that they made were acceptable. He made 18 decrees. You have a basket. It's a box. It's full of squash or gourds, cucumbers and pumpkins. You can still pour in mustard are little seeds. You can still pour mustard into that box and it will fit in. And parable for Rabbi Yeshua, how does that go? You have a basket that's full of honey. You put into it pomegranates and walnuts and the honey starts to come out, or it spits it out. Spits out the honey. You dropped in more. This is like a time management mashal. Use this example. This guy that has rocks, and then he can still fit the sand in, and then he can still fit the water in, but if you do it the other way, if you put the water in first, you can't fit the rocks. And it was supposed to show you how to prioritize. That it depends what you do first. But here, that's what it came from a Gemara. If you start off with the big things, then you can pour in the chardal afterwards. It could fit in. So what Rabbi Lezer is saying is that the decrees were accepted. And they instituted things that were able to be acceptable. As we're talking about passing the wallet to the non-Jew to carry. And according to Rabbi Yeshua, it seems like it wasn't acceptable. Why does it mean it wasn't acceptable? Because they made a decree that you have to pass it to the non-Jew and not to carry it less than 4 cubits. Comes out is that someone may end up carrying it for Amos and Rosh Hashanah. It's because they did this extra stringency. You ended up with the deraisas people actually carry. That's the way that Rashi learns it. Tosfos learns it a little different. And so both of them are saying that this is a good decree. The way Tosfos learns it is that, but if you take out the pomegranates and the walnuts, it won't spit out you won't lose the honey. So too over here, everything is going to work out. Okay, I don't know what the big difference would be then. Amar Mar, the master taught. Ein imay nachri mini chalachamar. If you don't have a non-Jew with you to take the wallet and it's Erev Shabbos, so you put it on the donkey. The Gemara asks a very important question. V'alei mechamer. What's going on over here? Your donkey is carrying a load. And you're making the donkey walk. We know that your donkey needs to rest on Shabbos. Mechamer is to cause the donkey to walk with the load on it. The Eibishter says you're not allowed to do work. You're not allowed to do work. Your animal's not allowed to do work. What's going on? The non-Jew, fine. He wasn't your servant. And he's not supposed to keep Shabbos anyway. Oh, well, you shouldn't be doing work for you. But this is your animal. And it's doing work for you. What type of work? Carrying. The Gemara gives an interesting answer. You do it in a way where you avoid the halachic issues of carrying. Now, in order for it to be actually carrying, you need to have an akira. And to have an akira means you uproot it, you get it started, and the hanach is you place it down. So what do you do over here? The animal starts to walk. You put it on the animal while the animal is walking. So you really did the akira because you took it off the ground. The animal doesn't do the akira. So it's sort of like a shnayim shasu. We had this before. If 2 people do a malacha, so they're pater. So this is a way out. You do it in a way where it's not a real malacha. The animal is walking when it takes the load on its back. You see, you have to recognize like this. If a person has an item in his hand and he begins to walk, so that's the akira. When he starts to walk, that's the akira. Let's say he picks it up off the ground while he's walking. It's interesting. He was already walking, but he picked it up. Well, then the akira is the picking it up. That was the setting it into motion. That was the lifting it off the ground, was the picking it up. If he was holding it and he started to walk, so then the walking is the akira, is the uprooting it from its position. Yeah, this is very interesting. So what we're saying is that in this case, putting it on the donkey, there's no akira because the donkey was walking already. Now the Rosh over here has a question on Rashi. Rashi started off this Gemara by saying, first Rashi on the Perek, give it to a non-Jew while it's still day before Shabbos starts. That would imply that if there's no nachri, if there's no non-Jew there, then you put it on the animal before Shabbos starts. Now, if you put it on the animal before Shabbos starts, then the Gemara has no kasha. It started walking before Shabbos. If you do an akira on Friday, that's not a malacha. It must be, the Rosh learns, that you're giving it to the non-Jew on Shabbos, which means that you're giving it to placing it on the donkey on Shabbos. And then the Gemara has a question. Well, there's an akira and there's hanacha. The Gemara says, no, there's no akira. The animal was walking when you put it on. The Gemara says, 1 second.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I have a question. Wait, hold on so you can see me. This case has come up previously where a person on Shabbos, they're walking to shul and all of a sudden they realize because they didn't bodek their pockets before, I got something. And there are many answers. And usually it's whatever you do, don't stop walking. And then when you get by shul, throw it back.
That we'll see in a moment.
Because who says there's an akira here? They could have been walking home in time for Shabbos. And then all of a sudden he realized, oh my God, it's almost Shabbos, let's not stop walking. And while he's walking, flips it.
That we'll see in a moment. Let's see that. Is there an echo? Or is it only when
I'm going off anyway. I'm just talking in my phone.
Is there an echo the whole time? Is there an echo now? Okay, good. Okay. With La Yosef, we had in last week's Pasha. There was no echo. Okay, the Gemara gives us a little bit of information here that we wouldn't have known if we didn't have, if we didn't go camel or donkey riding or all of that. It says, "V'yefshad le'kaim l'hashtamayim l'hatal glalim v'kakir v'hanacha." But it's impossible. The donkey is walking and it doesn't stop. The donkey has to urinate or excrete. It has the droppings that come out. So when it does that, it stops. It stops. It starts walking again. When it starts walking, why is it walking? You caused it to go. You said, I don't know, you don't say giddy up, but you say, move along. So you cause the animal to go. So it's impossible, even though you had this all worked out from beforehand, but the nature of the animal is that it's going to have to urinate. So you're doing a full malach on Shabbos. The Gemara says, well, there's a solution. Every time it stops, you take it off. And you don't put it back on until it starts to walk again. So yes, there's a hanacha, but there's never an akira. When you take it off, obviously you stay in one place or whatever. The animal stops. That's a hanacha. So the way it started was no problem because you put it on while it was walking. The animal stops. It's a hanacha. You take it off. The animal starts walking and you put it on the animal. And then it will stop again sometime. But there was never an akira by the animal. So the Gemara says, well, it looks like you figured out a solution. So why do you have to do this with an animal? Why don't you do it with your friend that's together with you traveling? Have him start walking. Put it on him. If he needs to stop, you'll take it off and you do it again. Amar Rav Papa says, Kol shebegufei chayiv chatas bechavere pater avalaser. If you would have done this whole thing, even if you would be walking and you pick it up while you're walking, there's still an akira. Why is there an akira? Because you picked it off the ground. It was the item was at rest. You lifted it off the ground. You were walking while you lifted it off, but the item was resting. So that would be a real malacha, and you would be chayiv chatas. Chayiv chatas means you'd have to bring a sin offering in the temple time. If you did it by mistake. Forgot it was Shabbos. Forgot it was Asa. If you do it to your friend, you put it on your friend while he's walking. So that's a case of Shnayim Shasu P'turim. Two people did a malacha, they're exempt. But it's still Asr. It's still prohibited. You can't just say, let's push this button together. Or, you do the steering and I'll push the gas. That's Shnayim Shasu. That would be Asr. Kol shechaverei pater aval Asr. Maybe the steering isn't part of the malacha. Anything that if your friend were to do, or if you were to do with your friend, Shnayim Shasu, you would be exempt. So b'chamayrim mutar l'chatchila. So then by the donkey, you're allowed to do it l'chatchila. That's what we're looking for. There's a gradient. There's levels here, and we're trying to get it down to the lowest level so that we should be able to allow this on Shabbos in such a case where a person is concerned about his money. Now, we say it's mutar l'chatchila in this case. I think it's mutar l'chatchila stam to get your things to shul or to bring food over to someone else's house by putting it on a donkey. That wouldn't be allowed. It's here, a person is concerned about his wallet, he's allowed to use this donkey in such a manner. Okay, Amar Vada Barava, Dr. Stein, this is your comment. Someone has a bundle that's on his shoulder, he runs. He should run to his house. Dafka ruts, he should run specifically. But he shouldn't go at ease. Shouldn't go slowly. My time, what's the reason? If he walks normally, he doesn't realize what type of pressure he's on. You see, what he's trying to do is he's trying to get to a safe place for the item that he's carrying without doing an akira and a hanacha. So he did an akira already. So if he stops, that's a hanacha. Stopping, even not putting it down, just stopping to walk is considered putting it down. It's resting. Then if you continue walking, then you did an akira again and you stop, you put it down. So what you want to do is you want to avoid all of that. So you have to get home quickly. Now you don't have to get home quickly. Gemara is saying you have to get home quickly because if you get home calmly, you might stop and schmooze and you'll forget. But when you're running, then you know you're under pressure. You can't stop. So the Leslie Akeres the Gemara says 1 second. That's all nice, but you're forgetting one point. What happens when you get home? You're gonna stop. And you transferred an item from a public domain to a private domain. And then you stop, there's a hanacha there. The Gemara says, you throw it off in a backhanded manner. You did a hanacha in a backhanded manner before you stop. It's very interesting. The hanacha, notice the way you did it, it's not that, well, the item comes to rest, but the way you did it was in a backhanded way, and that takes away the severity of the malacha. Okay. Amar Rami Bar Chama, just notice Teshus asked an interesting question. It says that even if you would do less than 4 amas, how would you get it into Rosh Hashanah? Less than 4 amas only helps in a public area. You can walk less than 4 cubits, but to transfer domain, but to once you cross the domain, you still have the same problem. How do you get it down? Okay, I guess the Gemara relies on this answer, that you throw it off without, in a backhanded way. We learned before once that you can put it on a makam p'tur, which was a surface that wasn't 4 tfachim, but it was above 10 tfachim. You could put it like on top of some sort of mailbox or something. Maybe on top of a fence that wasn't. We had this discussion once before, and we gave a different solution. Amar Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama says, "Mechamer achabem b'Shabbos b'shoigeg chayav chatas b'mezid is chayav skila." Very serious. The animal can do a malacha. Person has a load on his animal. He causes the animal to walk, and the person gets killed by Bezdin. He violated Shabbos. Or if he does it by mistake, without knowing that it's Shabbos, then without knowing that it's Asr, then he's Chayav Chatas. My time, what's the reason for this? Rami Bar Chama says this. Now, who's responding to Rami Bar Chama? The Gemara says Rava is, but on the side it says it's Rabba. The reason why on the side it says it's Rabba, maybe they had a different version, but it could be because soon Rabba is going to ask a question on this, so it can't be Rabba here that's saying it. The problem with Rabba is that Rami Bar Chama was much younger than Rabba. It's a little odd. A question on it, on the statement is being answered by an earlier sage. Amar Rabba, Damar Kra Leisasakam Malacha Ato Ubehemtecha says you shouldn't do work, you and your animal. Behemta Dumidide, there's this comparison here between you and the animal. Mahu B'Shaygig, Chayiv Chatas, B'Mezer Chayiv Skila, just like if you did a Malacha B'Shaygig, without knowing that it's Shabbos, you'd have to bring a sin offering. So also, if you did it on purpose, with witnesses and warning, there would be a death penalty, stoning. Also, if the animal does work, if it's inadvertent, it's a sin offering, and if it's on purpose, then it's chayav skila. Now, it's talking about the person, of course, not the animal. So that's how we see that mechamer is causing the animal to walk. It's going to be chayiv skila. We learn it from this juxtaposition in the pasuk. Ata and behemtecha. Amar Rava shtei tshuvas b'davar. So if Rabba said that, then Rava is now responding. Says there's two questions on this. Tshuvas means answers, but it means retort. There's two retorts to this. Two questions. Chada diksiv teirachas yelachem leisa b'shgaga v'nefesh shetasa b'yad rama hukshakol terkul avodah zara. One of the sources of which type of prohibitions require a sin offering is the sin of avodah zara. Now, that's the source that tells me what type of action is going to require the sin offering. Now, based on that, if I look at that pasuk by avodah zara, it says la'oiseh b'shgaga b'nefesh shetasa. It has to be performed. So ma avodah zara David ma'aseh b'gufei achinam yad David ma'aseh b'gufei. You shouldn't be chayav achatas. You didn't do the action. The animal did the action. You just spoke. Speaking by avodah zara would not require a sin offering. It has to be one of the actions. Bow down, offer some incense. There has to be an activity that's performed, and that would require the sin offering. But just to say, hail, I don't know what. So that wouldn't require a sin offering. So what are you saying over here? What did he do to the animal? He said, move along or something, and the animal walks. That shouldn't require the sin offering. This is the kasha on the explanation of Rabbah for Rami Bar Chama's din. Second question. We have a Mishnah that says that someone that violates Shabbos and he does something that if he would have done it by mistake, he'd be obligated to bring a sin offering. If he does it on purpose, then he gets capital punishment. Michlal, that phrase implies that there must be something, some malacha, that doesn't have the punishments of the guilt of the sin offering and the skila. Now, since I don't know what that is, but there must be something like that, or else you wouldn't have needed to define activity on Shabbos, prohibited activity on Shabbos, by this if such a thing didn't exist. You're excluding a certain type of activity that doesn't have that punishment. So what is it? It must be exactly what I'm looking for. It must be my neo lav de mechamer. Is it not causing an animal to walk? Because I don't know what else that could be. So it must be causing an animal to walk. And it's a kasha on Rami Bar Chama, or the way Rabbi explained Rami Bar Chama, that you really shouldn't be chayiv a sin offering for causing an animal to walk while it's carrying a load. And you definitely shouldn't be chayiv the capital punishment for it, from the fact that the Mishnah says it. The Gemara says, like, I have other ways of explaining that. That Mishnah could be talking about Tchumen, Balibid Rabbi Akiva. It's actually talking about walking too far on Shabbos outside the city, which there's a machlekes, if that's a rabbanan or a rabbinic or biblical. Rabbi Akiva holds it's biblical. So, but nevertheless, even according to Rabbi Akiva, there still is no sin offering and there's no capital punishment for just that walk that a person took on Shabbos. So that question we have an answer for. It's talking about Tchumen. So why did the Mishnah have to define if someone does a malacha that would have been chayiv b'shegeg gechatas and b'meiset skila? Well, we're saying we're excluding Tchumen, not if he walked too far. Or we have another option, another answer. V'havara libed Rabbi Yosi. You see, the pasuk says, "Leisavarois chomesh v'seichem b'yom Shabbos." You shouldn't light a fire. Gemara asks, 1 second, you're not allowed to do any work. So why do I need a specific pasuk to tell me not to light a fire? One of the malachas is fire. Why do you have to say that specifically? It's the only one that's said specifically. So there's machlekes Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Nassim or someone. And Rabbi Yonason maybe. Rabbi Yosi said that it was lalav yatzis, to tell me that lighting a fire doesn't have the same punishment as the other 38 malachas. It's only a negative prohibition. It doesn't have the capital punishment and the chatas. It's lalav. It goes away from the general prohibition of doing work to teach me something specific, and should teach me about everything. Right? Then the other opinion said that it's l'chalak yatzis. It's coming to tell me that just like Shabbos is itself a malacha, you don't have to do all 39 malachas to be chayiv. One malacha is good enough. So too all the other 38 malachas, you only have to do one of them to be chayiv. But according to Rabbi Yosi, who didn't learn like that, he tells me that this is there is a certain malacha that doesn't have a chatas or skila, doesn't have a sin offering or a capital punishment. So I don't need to say that the Mishnah was referring to mechamer, making an animal walk, because I have two other options. It could be Tchumen or it could be Rabbi Yosi's opinion regarding lighting a fire. Rav Zvid Masni Hachi. Rav Zvid taught it like this. Amar Rami Bar Chama. We're going back to what Rami Bar Chama said, that someone causes his animal to walk. The way we learned it before was that he's chayiv chatas b'shegeg and he's chayiv skila b'mezid. It says hamachamer achabim b'Shabbos. If someone causes his animal to walk, he's following his animal, which is the way that he makes it walk. Shabbos. So b'shegeg, if he does it, forgetting that it's Shabbos, so in a chayiv chatas. There's no sin offering, which is different than the way we just said it. We said before, but there is a sin offering. He says there's no sin offering. The way Rav Zvid has the statement of Rami Bar Chama. However, b'mezid chayiv skila is very interesting, but he still has the capital punishment. Masiv Rava has a question. It could be Rabbi, based on the way we had it before. If someone violates the Shabbos in one of the activities, if there is for an inadvertent action, the chatas, then there is a capital punishment if it's done on purpose. The Gemara is medayak. But if there isn't a sin offering, if it's done inadvertently, then you don't have capital punishment. That means that the capital punishment is dependent on what happens if it's done inadvertently. Is there a sin offering? Now, if it's dependent on that, then that messes up what Rami Bar Chama said. Rami Bar Chama gave us a case, according to Reb Shveh, where there's capital punishment if it's done on purpose, and there's no sin offering if it's done inadvertently. The Gemara says, "Miktani hayin chayavin." The Gemara asks, "You just made this up. You made a diak, but it doesn't say that." Hachikamer, it says different. It says, "Davar shechayavan al shegasechat is chayavan al zden eskila." It says that if there is a sin offering, if it's done inadvertently, then there's also skila, there's also capital punishment. It doesn't say what happens the other way if there's no sin offering. But if there is no sin offering, if it's done inadvertently, there still could be skila. All it said is that you'll never have a case where there's a sin offering inadvertently and no skila if it's done on purpose. But the other way, if there's no sin offering, if it's done inadvertently, doesn't tell you if there's skila. Could be there is. You asked the question based on an assumption, but if you read it carefully, you'll see that it never said that. Okay, my Neo, and what would be a case where there's no sin offering if it's done inadvertently, the person's exempt, but there's a capital punishment if he does it on purpose. Mechamer. It fits with the way Rav Zvid teaches Rami Bar Chama. If you cause the animal to walk. Okay, now the Gemara has another statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. However, it's introduced by an individual, and the Gemara is going to discuss this. Rava Achve the Rav Mari Barachel. Rava, the brother of Mari Barachel. It's an interesting name for a Tana, for an Amayr rather. His mother, we use his mother's name. Ba'amila Avua de Rav Mari Barachel. And some say that Rava wasn't the brother of Rav Mari Barachel. Some say he was the father of Rav Mari Barachel. Sounds like he's Mr. Rachel. Sounds like he's the husband. The Gemara now says, Lishna Basra Kasha Hadarav. According to this version that he's the father, you have a big problem on something that Rav did, because the Rav Achshreler of Mari Barachel Amani Bepursi de Babel. We have a Gemara that tells us that Shmuel, his daughters were taken captive, were abducted, and they came to Reb Chia, and there's a little bit of an issue here. But they said that they were clean. The captors didn't live with them. They wanted to be able to marry a Kohen. Now, I'm not sure how this fits with the next part of the story. It turns out that the captors ended up, his name was Isser Yura. His name was Isser. And he impregnated the Shmuel's daughter. And before he converted. Then he converted, and I think he married her. Now, the child that was born, Shmuel's daughter's name was Rachel, was Mari Bar Rachel. He's not called Mari Bar Isser because even though Isser is his father and Isser is a Jew, but when he was conceived, Isser wasn't Jewish. So they attributed him to his mother, Mari Bar Rachel. Now, must have been an important person, it's Mari Bar Rachel, and we have a rule that a convert is not supposed to become a king or in a position of power in the Jewish people. It's like you can't be president unless you're born in America, or a citizen or something. So, and that's the rule. Now, he had this issue because his mother was Jewish and his father wasn't. So Rav said it's not a problem because we follow the mother. Okay, so the Gemara is now saying, 1 second. Mari Bar Rachel, who's his father? According to this version, his father's name is Rava. Who's Rava? We quoted the Gra says that it's Rabbi Ba. That means Rav is a combination. He's a rabbi. He's an Amira. He's not a convert. So why does Rav need to say that? Why is Mari Bar Rachel allowed to become a king or a position of power, to be an official? Because we follow the mother. His father was Jewish. His father is Rava. So, okay. The Gemara answers, Trey Mari Bar Rachel have. Maybe there were two Mari Bar Rachels. Okay. This does not sound like a Gemara at all. It sounds like a comment that was written on the side of a Gemara that entered into the Gemara. And that's how Rashi sees it. Rashi says, don't have this whole thing. This is totally not part of the Gemara. Tosfos also takes it out. Bach takes it out based on them. And he has other texts of the Gemara that don't have it. Whatever the case is, all of that is an aside. The point over here was that Rava, a relative of Mari Bar Rachel, he says the following: well, we had Rami Bar Chama, not to be confused with Mari Bar Rachel. Rami Bar Chama had a statement about what's the din by mechamer, causing an animal to walk. We said that Yechayiv Chatas, we said that Yechayiv Skila. We had a statement from Reb Zvid that says you're not Chayiv Chatas, but you are Chayiv Skila. And now we have from Rabbi Yechanan that you're totally exempt. And it's being said over by Rava, the relative of Mari Bar Rachel. He says like this: Amar Rabbi Yechanan, mechamer achabehem to b'Shabbos patim miklam. You're absolutely exempt from everything if you cause the animal to walk. B'shaygeg, if you do it inadvertently, the animal's carrying a load and you have it walk in the public domain, you're exempt. Because when it comes to chatas, it needs to be comparable to idolatry. Idolatry, you're only chayav if you do an action, not by just saying something. So here you didn't do an action. You shouted at the animal and it started to walk. So there's no action, no carbon. You can't be chayav b'meza, the tanan. You can't be chayav skila, and it's done on purpose because we have a Mishnah. Mechalas Shabbos Daf shechayav al shegasi chatas v'al zden skila. V'ayin chayav al shegasi chatas in chayav al zden skila. He learned that Mishnah that it says that if you're chayav b'chatas, then you chayav skila. If you have it inadvertently, there's a sin offering. So then, if it's done on purpose, then there's the capital punishment. You don't have the sin offering, then you don't have the capital punishment. It's like that dinner, but there wasn't enough food. They told the kid or something. You'll get the dessert or something. So he didn't eat the course. He was waiting for the dessert. Comes to dessert. He said, no, you didn't eat the main course. No dessert unless you eat the main course. Anyway, there's no chatas. When it comes to skila, we say, oh, there's no chatas and there's no skila. What about malchus? There's no malchus either. Just for a negative. Usually if there's a negative prohibition in the Torah, that gets lashes. There's no lashes here. Why? Because usually it works like this. You never get two punishments for the same action. It's kamlei b'deramna. You always get the more that's the heavier punishment, and we let go the lesser punishment. Now, if there would be capital punishment here, then he won't get lashes. Now, it turns out that there is no capital punishment, but let's ignore that detail. This is a prohibition that's deserving of capital punishment. Because of this, you don't get the lashes either, because this law of Shabbos was originally for capital punishment. So now we don't look at the specific instance that in this case there's no capital punishment. We consider the prohibition as a law that's meant to be for capital punishment, which is don't do work on Shabbos. And therefore, you don't get the lashes that go along. Now, that happens to be a machlekes if it works like that. Does it work that any lav shenitin lazaris it's a lav, means a negative prohibition shenitin that's eligible for that, or that's its purpose was to be a warning for something that would be deserving of capital punishment, which is this verse as well. That's a machlekes. And even according to the opinion that says that you do get malchus for a lav shenitin lazaris misbezdin. The pasuk could have said, "Don't do your work or your animal." Atalamali. Why does it have to say you or your animal? It already said, "Don't do work." Who knew the mechayev until a mechayev? It's coming to tell me that only if he does the work he's chayev. That's what the ata. The ata is it says no. Ata. Only if you do the work will you have that. This punishment, but if the animal does the work, not, and therefore the prohibition, even the lav itself, won't give malchus because he didn't himself do the work. In other words, that ata is coming to exclude if it's the animal does the work. We have two ways of approaching this. Why there's no malchus? Either it's because it's a lav shenitin lazaris misbezdin, or even if I say lav shenitin lazaris misbezdin gets malchus, but over here the word ata excludes this case. What happens when he comes to the first courtyard of the city where he feels that it's safe? He can put down his wallet. What does he do? So we said that he puts it in that courtyard, and then that's it. So Amar Rav Huna tells us that let's say there's glass vessels on the animal. So the Mishnah told us that you're allowed to remove vessels that aren't muktzah. And vessels that are muktzah, you let them fall down. You just untie the ropes, it's on the animal, and you let them slide down, you let them fall down. So now Rav Huna is discussing a case where this is not a good idea to untie the ropes and let them collapse, let the bags collapse, because in the bags are glass vessels. So what do? Maybe karamuksasis. You bring cushions, pillows and blankets and mats. You put it beneath them. And then you let it fall. Now, why did you have to do this again? Because these items were muktzah. If they weren't muktzah, you'd be allowed to remove them directly. Umar says, "Fa'anan 1 second. You're allowed to take them off. This is glass vessels. They're not muktzah. It's a glass vessel. It sounds like wine glasses or something." Gemara answers, Rav Huna was referring to, what do you call the tubes that's used for blood? I forget what it's called. A vial, not a vial.
They say pipette.
Vials.
What is it?
Yeah.
Pipette.
Pipettes or vials, yeah. Good idea.
Vials.
Okay.
Vacuutainers.
Okay, there you go.
Done.
So we're talking about things that a bloodletter would have this tube, these containers. Now on Shabbos these are muktzah. You don't use them for anything else, and on Shabbos you can't do bloodletting. So these are muktzah and they're glass. So it's interesting that it goes back so far. And these are glass. So that's what Rav Huna means, that you have to put cushions under it so they don't break. We found an instance where glass is muktzah. Umar says, 1 second, you have a problem here. You're not supposed to cause any vessel to become unusable. Now, because you're putting muktzah on top of the cushions, those cushions were originally considered vessels. And now you're mevatel keli meichana. Originally, you could use that cushion to sleep. Now, it's as if you destroyed the cushion because you can't use it on Shabbos. It's called mevatel keli meichana. We had this issue with putting a plate under a lamp that was dripping or other things. Okay, the Gemara answers b'shlifi zutri, talking about small bundles, which you weren't putting it there for the muktzah to go on it, and then it would stay there. You put it on it, you let it drop down onto these cushions, but you'll be able to pull the cushions out and let it roll down to the next cushion. So it'd just be, one of these. It was part of the process. You'd get it off the animal by lowering it down cushion by cushion. So it wasn't really that you were going to leave it there the whole Shabbos on this. It was just temporary on this cushion. And it wasn't a buses because it wasn't there from Erev Shabbos. Buses would have to be from Binish Moshes. Okay, Meisvei. The Gemara has a question. If the animal is carrying tevel is grain where the tithe and the truma wasn't taken from. So it's really not usable. It's like raw material. And ashashias is glass. Gemara is going to tell us that it's really chunks of glass. So you take off, you untie the ropes, and you let it fall down, even though it's going to break. It's Kasha and Rav Huna. Rav Huna gave us a solution. You don't have to have it break. You can put cushions there. The Brisa tells us you just let it break. The Gemara says, Hasam b'kolsa. Over there, it was chunks. It's Rabbi Steinsaltz wrote that the word should have been bulsa. Bulsa means like a raw material. It's a chunk. Dekanami, and I'll prove it to you. It says Diktani Dumya de Tevel. Similar to Tevel, because those were the two examples. We had Tevel, that's grain that wasn't tied, and we also have glass. Ashashis doesn't mean that it's a chunk of glass. Ashashis could mean a glass lamp, but we used ashashis. It could mean but we're going to prove it that it's not really a glass lamp or something like that. It's just raw glass that's going to be used to probably heat it up and turned into a material, but it's raw material. So therefore, we let it break. So what does it mean that it breaks? It says, what are you saying you let it break? It has no use. What's the problem? It's not something that it's the issue. It's just raw material. Umar says, no, when it breaks, you lose splinters. I'm not concerned about the splinters getting into people's feet over here. I don't know why not. But we're more concerned that you're not going to have all of the material that you started with. Things are going to get lost. So we could think maybe that's a hefsid muat. It's a little bit of a loss. We should allow you to put the cushions under it. So we say no. Hefsid muat, we're not concerned about those little splinters that are going to get lost when it falls down and cracks. We were concerned if a vessel would crack, but for raw material to lose a little splinter, that we're not worried about. And so therefore you don't use cushions for this. There must be that it was a heter to use the cushions. We don't apply that heter for things that are insignificant. Tanya, Reb Shimon ben Yochayim, b'emtei tuna shlif shel tvua minicha nechreshi tachtel masalka letzadach. Everyone neichel mela. Let's say the animal has on it grain, bundles of grain. So it's muktzah. How do you get it off? You don't want to leave it on the animal. So it says you use your head to push it to the side to let it fall off. Using the head was like
is this because of shinui?
A shinui, yeah. Kalachayad, muktzah kalachayad. So the donkey of Rabbi Gamliel was carrying honey. He didn't want to take it off until Mitzvah Shabbos. There's a question on this right away. And the Mitzvah Shabbos Mesa, it died. The animal died. left it on. Rabbi Gamliel was being
Tsar
firm.
Balechaim doesn't.
We're going to see in a moment. We'll see in a moment. Very good. Very good question. Yeah, the Gemara asks straight away, before it gets to that question, asks first, the first question is, Vanantanan neitel kelim anitalim. Honey is not muktzah. Why didn't he take it off? That's the first question. The Gemara answers kishe hidvish. I didn't know that it works like this, but I've seen this in the Gemara before. It said the honey spoiled. I didn't know honey spoils.
Who says honey spoils? I heard it never expires.
Yeah, that's what I thought also. Maybe
Maybe it was the gourmet.
Maybe it was honey from dates. Maybe that's different.
It had something else in it.
Maybe it's date honey. When we heard that honey doesn't spoil, that could be bee honey. After that, I have to look that up.
Right, like nectar. Yeah, not necessarily like bee honey. Okay.
So because they used date honey also. So the Gemara says Hidrish l'may chazi. So what is he worried about? What was he meant to do with it? What does the Gemara mean? Hidrish l'may chazi. Why was Rabbi Gamliel carrying it? This is a question I understand Rabbi Gamliel. It's not a halachic question. One answers like Ksisa the Gamli. Well, it could still be used as a salve for cuts on animals, on the donkeys. The agitation on the skin from the load of the animal would rub the skin off, and then they would put this salve on it. And it doesn't have to be fresh. It could be spoiled also. It still works. Okay. The Gemara asks, why didn't you just let it fall off? So Mr. Ziki. Apparently that means that he didn't want them to crack. I'm not familiar with those words.
So what did you say the Kisisa de Gamli was?
Yeah, that's for the cuts on the.
As a healing, as a swab. Right. Oh yeah.
A salve on
an ointment.
An ointment, good. Yeah. The Gemara asks, so why doesn't he bring the cushions? Over there, it's going to make the cushions dirty, and then they won't be able to use them, and that he doesn't want to do. It's going to be mevatel those cushions. Moshe's question. What about the tsar belechaim? The animal is suffering. You see, it suffered, it died. There's a machlekes in the Gemara. If suffering to an animal, we're not allowed to cause suffering to an animal. The question is if that's a biblical law or a rabbinic law. If it's a rabbinic law, then the biblical laws are stronger than it. And, well, what biblical law is? Yeah, it's just muktzah. I should say that differently. If it's a rabbinic law, then I won't overrule it then it won't overrule other rabbinic laws. But if it's a biblical law, tsar belechaim, suffering to an animal is a Torah law, so then that will overrule the rabbinic laws about moving these items. Abaya ashkeche l'Rabba the kamashafshuf le'levrei agava the chamra. Okay, Abaya sees Rabba. Abaya grew up in Rabba's house. And Rabba is playing with his son, and not Abaya's son, but Rabba's son, I think. And he's making like a slide off the animal. It's like, off the side of the animal. He's taking his son and letting. Now, the problem is it's Shabbos. Now, the animals are muktzah on Shabbos. You're not supposed to, you're allowed to feed them, but just to use them for other things, they don't really have a use on Shabbos. So you're not supposed to be using the animal. So Amalei Kamashtamesh Shmar Bebali Chayim says you're using an animal on Shabbos. Amalei Tzadin and Tzadin like Dazer Burabana. No, when they said they're not to use the animal, they meant you're not supposed to go on top of it. You shouldn't put things on top of it. I'm just using the side. This is not what the decree was about using an animal. Minat Tamra, Ditnan, Minat Tamra. What's the proof for this? Ditnan, Mate Chavalam Asakim Neifim. I'll give you the proof. The proof is that when it says that you have a load that's on the animal, you're allowed to untie the ropes and let it slide down. You see, you're using the side of the animal when it slides down. My love, B'chaver Gavalki. Well, the Gemara actually learns us that it's the type of tie that you have to lean against the animal to get it untied. It's one of these things that gets really tight. You have to push in to get it off. So you're pushing on the animal to untie it. Davlut Stadin, you see, you're using the side of the animal to get this untied. With Stadin Legosu Baraban, it's not looking at it from the sliding off it, it's looking at it from the pressure that you have to put on the side to untie it. The Gemara says, how do you know that's the pshat? Maybe B'chaver al Aglavki, the Lehavit Stadin, maybe it was tied in a looser way. I'm not familiar with those words. Different types of tying loads on the animals. But maybe it's a looser tie that you don't need to lean on the side. Inami Balachter was a type of rope that was you can untie without leaning on the animal. Okay, let's leave it over here today.